16. Vertical Vision 1. Phenomenal life, the waking dream, may be said to take place on a plane surface, not as it is visually perceived, but temporally. On that plane surface, every action is followed by its reaction, every cause by its effect. This is the world of karma, of the force of circumstances, and is what we know as our life. But an awakened sage lives and thinks vertically. If his body is flowing horizontally in the stream of time like the rest of mankind, his mind has acquired the vertical dimension, which rises at right angles from each moment of that time river. While B hits A because A has hit B, tick-tock, the sage has no such reaction, and knows no occasion for such automatic reflex. For, from the vertical dimension, the height from which he perceives, he sees not each moment's incident, but the whole picture stretched out before him. He may ignore the blow, or he may turn the other cheek for the striker's sake, but the detachment of his vision will admit of no reaction. Perceiving the preceding circumstances of the blow, he is free from constraint to react to it, and the chain reaction is broken. To A and the rest of mankind, the sage's inaction is unaccountable, foolish, or contemptible, though a few may regard it as wise. In fact, it is none of those things. It is the exercise of a freedom which he alone can have. Vertical vision is a consequence, not a method. It cannot be practiced. But the understanding of it, its being envisaged, may point towards the state of wisdom from which it will result. "17. Golden Silence. The faculty that distinguishes man from all other animals is that of speech, and he makes use of it with the enthusiasm of a convert and the lack of moderation of a child with a new toy. The popular notion of government at all levels is government by talking, and often it amounts to little else. The inefficiency of this is demonstrated by the fact that when obvious security is at stake, as in the case of ships at sea and armies on land, government by talking is abandoned, and there is substituted for it the rule of one man, whose word is law and whose words of command are so brief as to ignore syntax. When it has happened that in the first enthusiasm of popular revolutions that natural law has been temporarily abrogated, the ship has been known to sink and the army to be beaten. It is instructive and also entertaining to observe that one of man's methods of showing respect on the death of a celebrated individual or in commemoration of a catastrophe is to observe 1 minute or even 2 of silence, that is, to refrain from talking for that all too brief period. And that has been apt to prove too great a strain for regular application. It would appear that the maintenance of silence is well nigh insupportable to the average man, and at the same time he cherishes an illusory notion that almost anything can be achieved by chatter. Verbiage in his primary occupation and his method of self-assertion, and in many countries, even a musical program on the radio rarely lasts for more than a few minutes without being interrupted by an outburst of entirely superfluous gab. Gab, in short, is his idea of living, and he expresses his ideas, even the most erudite, with the exception of higher mathematics, in the greatest possible number of words instead of in the fewest. But talking is probably the greatest hindrance to the development of man's spiritual possibilities. And of all forms of activity, the one which most efficiently bars his way to that higher state of consciousness, which is his unique possibility, his right, and his only certain justification. This is hardly an original observation. The Chan masters evidently knew it, since they spoke so briefly as to be barely comprehensible, and the most vital sutras, shorn of subsequent repetition, give their message in a few lines. The fact is recognized in Christianity by the Trappists, and in India yogis impose upon themselves long periods of silence, and, when abroad, single days at stated periods. This needs not to be taken to mean that even the most serious Occidentals who follow the urge towards enlightenment should abandon speech. In the course of every 24 hours, 1/3 is already devoted to silence. But they might perhaps realize that chatter is not only a hindrance, as has been pointed out, but is quite clearly a psychological mechanism of defense against progress on that path on the part of the skandha impulses operating in collaboration with the I concept developed by the phenomenal individual. It is neither difficult nor rare to be able to observe that mechanism in operation, and in such cases at least mental discipline, as it is called, is necessary, though the element of discipline should be merely a result, the result of understanding and observing that mechanism at work. This understanding need in no way hinder communication of ideas, of all kinds of interesting observations, of humor, even of gossip. For there are 16 hours available for all that, as well as for periods of silence. Perhaps there need not even be anything so formal as periods of silence, but just an abandonment of absolutely superfluous gab. (18) Debris 1. Subjectivity is what is left when all objects are ignored. Why? Because that is the process of resolving subject-object into pure consciousness. People who lecture are pseudo-jivan muktas. If they do not represent the I concept posing as the self, why would they do it? If they did not give that impression, why would people go and listen to them? This does not apply to answering questions, nor to private conversation, which be just the interpretation of the words of the masters. Pseudo-evele cannot fail to mislead, however good their intentions. These are hard words, for the intentions are probably nearly always good. But if there is truth in them, is it not necessary to point it out? Realization is a matter of becoming conscious of that which is already realized. Split mind is composed of thoughts and does not otherwise exist. Whole mind is devoid of thoughts and is real. Therefore, the splitting of the mind must be the division into two-sided thoughts. For whole mind is the source of thoughts. It is not the eye that sees. It is not the ear that hears. There is seeing, there is hearing. Who sees? Who hears? No one. That is the truth. For the seeing and the seen, the hearing and the heard are impersonality, impersonal consciousness. Reality, self in Vedanta, is your ever-present consciousness. The space-time continuum is mind. Mind in manifestation, not pure consciousness. Static mind, let us say, whose counterpart is the dynamic aspect we recognize as thought. Matter is probably not different from its matrix, the space-time continuum. If Bhagavan, note, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, WWW also often refers to him as Maharshi or the Maharshi. If Bhagavan is the self, we too are Bhagavan, and Bhagavan is us. His words are ours. Listening to him, we ourselves are speaking. He appears to be without, far away in space and time. But he is also within, like any guru. He is no entity. I am no entity. We are no entity. We are unself. There is only one, and we are that. Each of us is all, and all are one. There is only one self, and we are all, each, that. The explanation of Maharshi's teaching, Who Am I?, focuses split mind on its subject, i.e., whole mind, impersonal subjectivity, the Father, and so transcends the duality of split mind, subject-object. Who am I? Is not just an intellectual exercise, as has been thought, but a technique for resolving the basic dualism which bars the way to synthesis. Realization. A man who is seeking for realization is not only going round searching for his spectacles without realizing they are on his nose all the time, but also, were he not actually looking through them, he would not be able to see what he is looking for. His only trouble is not knowing that they are there, and that alone hinders him from looking in the right direction. But the right direction is not without, for realization can never be an object of vision. The spectacles in question are mirrors that reflect the subject that is looking for itself. It is probably an error, and a fundamental error, to seek the resolution of each pair of opposites in some third quality or thing. There is only a common factor behind all relative interpretations. In doing as we do, we are still subject to the notion that things with names really are. But there are no two things, and there is no third thing, just a common factor or background, which is real. Perhaps a fifth dimension of space, or the notion of multiple dimensions beyond those we know and can use, plus time, are vague hypotheses, laboratory instruments that are being discarded. Would it not be more accurate to envisage not further directions of measurement, which we are not able to conceive, but a permanent substratum that is common to the dimensions we actually use, onto which transient images are projected, a continuum transcending, permeating, and enveloping them, a continuum that itself is real? The universe is not real in itself, but only as a projection of underlying reality. Phenomena are real as projections onto the screen of reality.